There we go. The reason you have organization, communications, and decision making is to get decisions made and to make sure that the right people are talking to each other and they don't depend upon communications that might not occur. Now, you can feel free to reassign roles or to shift roles or to rotate as your project goes along. It's a nice way to mix things up. Your org chart is not set in concrete, but you need to know who is responsible, because if you as a team member have a question about something, you need to know exactly who to ask that question to and not have to poll each member of the team to figure out who has that answer. Okay, Python games. Who's the project manager for Python games? Give us a 2-minute description of your... This is pretty standard, pretty good, and it works. So,
do you want me to go up there?
No, just stand and talk about it.
So our team consists of 6 people in our group. Sorry, that top box should say management, not development. That was user error there. But yeah, so we have management, which consists of me, the project manager, and our chief architect, which is Brandon Fry. Me as a project manager, I'm basically mainly focused on communication between the different teams and making sure that everybody's on task. So I'm the one in charge of creating and submitting the status report each week. And then Brandon, our chief architect, he's basically one making the final say on our overall architecture. And so both of us, we communicate with, we'll go to this left side, which is our QA, so Steven, who's in charge of testing mainly, making sure that we have unit tests that will, that will test basically all of like the main functionality, as well as just our overall game, because our overall game is basically making, at least for right now, level 1 of Super Mario. And then we also have research and development, which is Josh Campbell. So he's in charge of just creating, figuring out like what are the good APIs to use. We're going to be, at least right now, our idea is using Python games. So he's the one in charge of researching Python games and making sure that we all know are on the same page of which functions to use. And then we have development, which we have a front-end developer, which is Dylan. He's the one in charge of like the UI and the user interface and all that kind of stuff. And our back-end developer, which is Trent, will be obviously like the behind-the-scenes guy that makes sure that the game actually runs. So Josh will, from his research, should be telling our developers, which things to use, and then from QA, like our testing, which things didn't work, and which things that they need to develop.
Okay. Thanks. Now, professional tip. You will all, trust me, at some point, you will be asked to do presentations with slides. Do not read the slide to your audience. I dare say most of it, and that's not a criticism, most of you looked at that org chart and basically had most of that information figured out within about 10 seconds as to who is doing which role. What you want to do when you put up a slide is talk to the things that are not on the slide. In your case, it would be something like this we chose this division of labor because we saw a clear separation between management, development, research, and quality assurance. That's nothing. Be terse, talk to the things not on the slide. The rest of everyone else is going, glad I dodged that one. Most interesting thing, and I like this risk here. Creating a game is much more difficult than we thought. Something you will hear from me as someone who shipped a commercial game 30-odd years ago, but has followed the gaming industry ever since. My personal opinion is computer gaming is the highest expression of computer science because it involves user experience, user interface, modeling, simulation, graphics, data management, and it has to be fun. Spreadsheets don't have to be fun. Word processors don't have to be fun. Games, someone has to look at your game in a 30-second trailer on Steam and say, yeah, I'm going to pay $40 for that. And by the way, I have learned through sad experience, I always wait for a Metacritic score or something like that to come out first, because I have pre-ordered some games that have turned out to be real dogs. Anyway, GM tools. Okay, now that you've been forewarned,
Yeah.
tell us why you came up with this organization, what the thought was behind it.
Okay, so there's 5 members of our team, and we talked about different strengths that we all have, different things we want to try out. So some things that we wanted to try out, or some things that people are already good at, such as front-end development, back-end development, database management, QA and testing, and then there's also DevOps. And then, of course, management at the top. We got our strengths out. We put the senior developers as kind of the strong points, and then those who wanted to learn as like the junior developers underneath. You can see that there on the front-end development, back-end development database. And then from there, we put our interests in and where we want to go.
I liked your risk too. This is an important one that I dare say all of you will face. You may not be able to implement all the ideas you have for the project. I'm not sure in 2 years of teaching this, I've seen 1 or 2 projects that have actually completed what they set out to do. Most have, as we were talking about before the class started throwing people off the sled to the wolves. Features off the sled to the wolves, not people. Anyway. Okay, CLC painting. Give us a minute on your org chart here.
Yeah, so our project manager isn't here, but
That's fine. Step up.
So basically, we did the same thing as these guys. We talked about strengths and weaknesses, and that's how we kind of decided who the leads would be on the front and the back end, as well as who would be our QA floater, because Jason knows the most about all the different tools we're using and also the project that we're actually doing and the company we're working with. So that's kind of how we divided it, and we just went based on strengths and weaknesses.
Okay. Now, this is the text I took. You sit down. This is the text I took off your status report. The project description status report is not itself a status report. It is your current description of what you're building. Brief, with any changes that you may have. You do have tasks accomplished, tasks delayed, tasks for the future where you can put current progress to date. This is almost more the roles and responsibilities description than it is the project description on the status report. So I will look for things like that on the status report. And one of the things I love to see on the status reports are the risks and issues, because that means you're actually thinking through what you're doing. Doesn't mean you'll be downgraded if you don't have them, but if you go a long time without a risk or an issue, I'm thinking, okay, these guys really actually looking at what they're doing. Wacky games. Give us your 60 seconds.
So we've got a pretty small group. We also talked about strengths and weaknesses and just put people where they seemed they'd work best. We figured we need some of our quality assurance because we're designing the games. We're going to need a lot of testing going along through it. We need both front and back end because, as you said, we need UI and database type stuff. That's basically it.
Okay, that's fine. That's another thing. You don't have to talk more than you need to actually describe something. Something be aware of in presentations, also in teaching. Also, you'll notice this. Have you noticed the similarities between the org charts? Part of it is we're using templates. Part of it is because there are fundamental ways of organizing a team that tend to show up over and over again. There are patterns that are useful depending on the constraints of the project itself. I liked your description. That's a good example of a short description of the product description from the top paragraph there from the status report. That's really all that's necessary. This is what we're building. And then when you start throwing features away, say, and it's not going to do this. Okay, life tracker.
Yeah, so there's our org chart. The biggest things that aren't on here, the QA admin. So as a group, we are planning on doing test room development. So it's less about QA at the end and more about QA throughout it. And the QA admin will be doing that throughout, making sure that things are being tested as they're going. Another thing about, so yeah, it's just like everybody else. We have back-end and front-end developers. They'll be coordinating together, as you can see right there. And the biggest thing is so that we make sure that all the information that's going to be passed throughout the app is going to be done correctly. So yeah, that's basically,
Okay.
basically it.
And you'll notice on their project description, they said we narrowed it down. In other words, here's our basic description. This is how we just in 1 week narrowed down the scope of what we're doing. Another good risk, finding times when we all meet together. And that's a real risk, as I suspect all of you have found. Okay, math but more. Min.
So that's our org chart. We organized it in significantly more roles because like ours has the possibility to like have a larger or smaller scope depending on what we decide to do with it. And what else would you like to say?
That's fine. And this is another lesson. We'll do, go ahead, you can go. Typically, we'll do this with each of the deliverables. We'll bring them each up either on your wiki or I'll have a slide presentation. I'll have someone from each group talk about it for a minute or so. And what you'll find is after about the fourth or fifth one, it's kind of like, okay, we did what they did too. It's this, and everyone's like, yeah, sit down. So I like this risk too, trying to figure out the concreteness of our roles. That is a real issue. It's kind of like, okay, what exactly am I going to be doing? And the challenge you have is you're on an accelerated time frame. You've got about 12 weeks. And you have to figure out and you have to be able to adapt quickly if things are not working. Property owner.
Okay, yeah, so we only have 6 people on our team, and so we decided that we probably needed to make sure the front end and the back end are the same, or represented as well as management. For me as project manager, I'll probably be mostly concerned about the front end, and as our chief architect, Brandon, he'll be mostly concerned about the back end. We also included a buddy type system because we understand that for group meetings of 6 people at one time a week, that'll probably be our max once or twice a week, but we probably won't be able to meet more than that and get everybody coordinated. So we kind of have a buddy system set up so where, as you guys can see, that me and the chief architect will be in correlation with each other on the front end and back end, as well as each person working on the front end and back end will have somebody to correlate and communicate with, just in case if they have any questions on connection problems or if they're like have any questions on how the things are going to be working out. So yeah, that's basically it.
Good approach. Tight cohesion, loose coupling. That's a good software principle. It's a good organizational principle as per Conway's law. Yeah, you have a question?
I have a question. As a chief architect role, I originally thought that it was mostly just kind of the back-end person that's arranging how things go. But when I read Brooks, he made it seem like he's actually, or she is more responsible in addition to describing the interfaces, and that made me think front-end user interface. Which is not me.
Yeah, the architect responsible for user interface design could be. I certainly did a lot of that at Pages because I spent a year and a half mocking up the user interface design, and it was driven in part by the underlying architecture and vice versa. So yeah, but the idea is that there are conceptual principles that are applied consistency end to end throughout. Now, part of what you have to learn as a chief architect is to hand off a lot of the decision making. In other words, here's the framework. Here's how everything has to work together. At Pages, it's like, you've got footnotes, make it work. But this is the framework in which it has to work. This is the document you'll be dealing with. Here's the structure, the architecture. Go make framework. I'm not going to do any architecture work on the footnotes. Make them work. Here are the constraints. And we had someone on text engine. We had someone on rendering of text, and so, well, that was for text engine. Anyway, this is also a good description of saying, here's what we're doing, this is what we're going to do, and by implication, what we're not going to do. Puzzle RPG.
So, that's our org chart right there. As you can see, I'm the chief architect, and me and Max, who's the project manager, have lines of communication open to everyone. We have figured that both the two of us and our QA lead, Michael, would need to be in constant communication with the 3 more development heavy in the trenches roles, which is general design and development, UX UI design, and graphics animation design. And then the UX UI design we need to be able to speak to the developer and the animator to be able to give feedback on what worked and what didn't and what was confusing for the user.
What you'll find, I'm sure you've all heard about the classic architectural considerations new campus was developed, and rather than put in sidewalks, they just put sod down everywhere, and they waited to see what paths the students took between buildings after they built the sidewalks. Which is a very clever idea. Some of you in your teams are going to experience the same thing. In other words, your original org chart's going to say, well, this person has to talk to this person, this person. What you will find as the project goes along is where the true channels of communication are. You don't necessarily have to go back and change your org chart, but just be aware that to the extent that you encourage essential communication, it's going to come back. I saw this learn unity on your tasks. I thought, whoa!
Not master unity, but understand how to.
Yeah, but no one on your team has ever used Unity before. Okay, this is a pitfall we will talk about. And it's a very tempting one, but it's a common one, which is you will get into real life situations where your manager wants you to build some new system, mission critical system, probably under a tight deadline, using technology no one has ever used before, for whatever reason. And they're expecting that because they've chosen this technology, it will speed things up instead of slowing things down. I have stories I will tell about that later, but just be aware that is a major risk factor, yes.
So what would be the way to avoid those situations? Just use the technology you have? Or
You
find someone that
use the
knows?
technology you have or do pilot projects. The way to avoid it is to, and this, see, management doesn't like pilot projects. Management wants to save money. They want to reduce headcount, they want software out sooner, they want newer and spiffier things. So they're like, well, if we give them, if they say they have to use this language and this library and so on, which none of them ever used before, we'll ship things faster and on time. It's like, no, you won't. You will ship things late, and there will be lots of bugs because people don't understand it yet. There's a certain, we're back to armor. You're going to hear me say that almost every class. There's a lot of experimentation that will go on, and you'll discover the things you didn't know. And I think it was Unity. We had a previous semester. We had a project that one of the programmers had used Unity on one platform. I think the Macintosh. And they were doing the project on Windows. And one of the comments they raised halfway through the class was, "They don't work the same." It's basic concepts and so on, but a lot of what I learned over with Unity on the Mac didn't translate to Unity on Windows. So there are things there. Data analytics tool. Yes?
We did a similar thing as everyone else, chose roles based off of strengths and interests. We chose a Scrum Master because with such a short time period to develop, we have a lot of features we could develop, but we want to stay really focused on which features we are going to do, and then focus on getting them as shippable as we go.
Okay. And I like your project description. It's short, succinct. It says, this is what we're trying to build. So, Park Me. Yes.
So we've got a pretty big team of 9 people. So the main thing about ours, the names are on there, but basically we have a front end and back end team, all of which 3 to 4 people on each one. So the idea is hopefully they can eventually start kind of meeting on their own and interacting with each other to get work done faster.
Okay. This is another case where the project description, this is more tasks accomplished than what should be in the project description box on your status report. I do like the risks. I do want names on an org chart, so update it with names. Social media for family events. I think those are the people who were not here. Okay.
Yeah, I had a family event going on.
Apparently. Trash talk. Trash talk, yes.
So we did basically the same thing as everyone else, choosing based on strengths, weaknesses, and interests. We decided to mix the chief architect and QA role, because that way the person who's designing, primarily responsible for designing the interfaces, ensures that they work as expected.
By the way, I was the lead bug finder at Pages. I was chief architect, but I found more bugs than anyone else, fixed more bugs, because I knew the whole system. I was deep into everyone else's code. And when something broke, I could pretty much start isolating and saying, okay, I know it's not this, I know it's not this, I know it's not this. So that's actually a natural merger. Plus, the chief architect tends to be more protective of her, his design. It's like, no, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Didn't you listen? Here are the diagrams. Anyway, seriously, sadly. Anyway, didn't I explain this to you already? Okay, I like your description here too. That's a nice, succinct description of what you're trying to build. Text-based adventure game. Yes.
I'm the same as everyone else except for we have focused more on creatively because the success of this will be how fun the story is, so it's a lot of development.
Yep. Again, we would like names in the org chart. So get it in and repost it with that. Kyle. Yes.
So I guess I'll just address our risks. We started and we said, well, what technology do we all know and understand already? And Android was the clear answer, but we were all really sick of using Android. So we thought, well, we're going to try out React Native. We've got a lot of people on the team who already know it. We've got a few who want to learn it, and so we thought, okay, it's probably a good mix. So we've organized our groups accordingly. One person already knows it, and the other can either knows it or can learn from them. And yeah, that's basically it.
Okay. But you have it might be harder than we think. At least you have people who are familiar with it.
That's why I say that, because not everybody knows it.
And here's the problem with this sort of time frame. Normally what you want to say is, okay, we're going to try this, and if we get X weeks into this and it's not working, we're going to pull the ripcord. Really don't have time for that here. So what you may end up doing is scaling back what you're actually doing to match what you're actually able to accomplish in React. And that's it. Oh, we got through that a whole lot faster than I was afraid we would. Okay, I thought it was going to take a lot longer. Let's talk then. Yes?
Do you mind if I ask about the roles of like chief architect and program and product manager?
No, please ask.
It seems like they're in charge of like keeping like the organization together, and when I've seen it with like PMs and like chief architects, like they're so busy just doing that the entire time, like that's all they do. But with our projects, it doesn't seem like we would need to be like micromanaging our team like that. So.
No, and with your projects, given the size of the teams and the scopes of the projects, there's a good chance the project managers and chief architects will be coding and other things. So you always fill in, jump in and help out where you can. So don't feel that having a certain role says, oh, I can't do that. No. You want people to contribute where they can, and particularly when you get into time. You will run into organizations where people will say that's not my job. And there are various reasons for that. That's never been my attitude. If anything, I tend to irritate people because I dig into places which they think isn't my job. It's like, well, no, this is a problem. This is why we have to address it. Well, that's shut up an architect. Literally, I was once told, shut up an architect. The true story, Eric. It's my first consulting job. I think I made reference to it in a previous lecture. After Pages closed their doors, ran out of money. Had written this book, Pitfalls of Object-Oriented Development, was looking for new work. There's a chief architect job up at Aeronautical Radio that does your radio satellite phone stuff. And the vice president there bought my book and said, we're making all these mistakes, and hired me as a consultant to come in and basically improve their object-oriented programming and design skills. This is the project I told you about that I said, well, where's the architecture? And there were 4 design documents from the 4 subsystems that did not fit together. So I had to actually create an architecture. Well, while I was working on that, there was another project that was spinning up, doing some network management backbone for a major telecom company. And we had a meeting. I had started working in July. This was like first week in November. I attended my first meeting. Internal staff meeting, higher management, the program manager who was interacting with the telecom company, a number of other people. I was there basically as the senior architect mentor in the division. And So they presented this timetable, said, okay, we're going to start coding